Hey folks, this is Kalori. Welcome to Scrum and Agile Digest. So let's look at some sprint planning anti-patterns. Before you start sprint planning, you need to look at team member availability. Not checking that, that's an anti-pattern, right? Not looking at the team velocity, how much the team can actually commit to the stories, that's an anti-pattern. No capacity planning, that's an anti-pattern. Not validating if the product backlog has been refined, it's been groomed, it's been prioritized, that's an anti-pattern. That's going to backfire. You're not going to have good user stories in the sprint planning. Every user story needs to have an acceptance criteria and a sprint goal. That basically means a definition of ready, definition of done. That has to be validated, approved by the product owner, and it has to be approved and communicated to the team. If you don't have that, that's again an anti-pattern for sprint planning. Don't overcommit, right? And similarly, don't undercommit. Try to commit according to the team's velocity. If the product owner is present in the sprint planning, of course it's not mandatory, but if they want to be present, they shouldn't dictate the how. The how is the team's responsibility. The team will figure out how they want to do the thing, right? Not the product owner. The product owner will define what needs to be done from the product backlog, but the how has to come from the team. The next thing, so these were the anti-patterns, right? The next thing, which is very important and which comes up in any kind of project, is technical debt, right? And how do you deal with technical debt? So technical debt, just like any other debt, right? It's not a good thing. If you have a debt, you need to try to pay it off as soon as possible, right? That's the basic thing, is to accrue less interest. The concept is the same in technical debt. Technical debt is something like a design debt or a code debt, right? That's used very heavily in software development, and it actually reflects the implied cost that you have, because of the implied cost of doing additional rework, right? That you might have to do because you probably chose an easy solution or you tried to choose a better approach. But basically, it's a cost to the team. It's a debt to the team that you have to pay off, right? It's like a loan. The longer you postpone paying it back, the more interest you accrue. It's never a good thing. So in Scrum, same concept. If you have technical debt, you need to try to pay it off as soon as possible. Otherwise, you'll have long-term wrong decisions. It will bite into your other sprint stories, and it's never a good thing. So try to pay it off as soon as possible. So you can see here, this graph is actually showing you the impact of technical debt over time, right? So time is on x-axis and y-axis is showing new features. So you can see here that x-axis is showing how technical debt is affecting new development over time. So the blue bars are showing new development. As the time is progressing, right, the time for the new development is getting smaller as technical debt takes over. So as technical debt, which is shown by the orange graph, is taking over, the time for actually developing new features is decreasing. So you can see how it can backfire on the team, right? The team hardly has any time. If you look at the end, towards the end of the x-axis, the team hardly has any time to work on any new features. It's all taken over by the technical debt. Their team is struggling with the complexity and the debt. So technical debt for a team is never a good thing. Try to pay it off as soon as possible. Now, why would you have a technical debt, right? Teams usually accrue technical debt because of multiple reasons, right? They may not have good test scenarios. They have lack of tests. They have lack of technical documentation. The code that's being written, right? It might be really old code, like 5, 10 years old, and it may not work according to the standards of the code today, right? It has poor readability, or the code might be huge. So, as you add more and more code to, already a big existing code, it becomes very difficult to maintain it, right? And it becomes difficult to modify it, change it. So, these are main reasons for technical debt. What you can do is, first of all, you should have a common coding practices. There are common coding practices out there. Make sure your code follows a common protocol. Have another set of eyes. You can do pair programming, or you can do, let multiple developers look at the code to make sure that, they all understand it. It adheres to a proper protocol practice. Don't have any secrets, don't have any variables or methods which only you understand, right? So you kind of walk away with the proprietary information if you leave the company. Don't do that. Don't have secrets in your code. Make sure that everybody is able to understand the code. Also, many sprints, what they do as many Scrum teams, they have, along with the product backlog, user stories and sprint planning, they also have technical debt. Every sprint they try to pay off little by little technical debt. I think that's a really good practice. That way you don't keep technical debt all for the future. You are slowly paying it off, and that's very important. So how do you resolve technical debt? You can have technical debt registers, right? You can where you track your debt, right? And you can take decisions based on your debt, right? You can look at the debt as RAID log. Some companies call it a RAID log. That RAID it's an acronym. It stands for risks, assumptions, issues, and dependencies. And you can have a technical debt, you can have some action items, you assign the debt to some person and you track it, and you make sure, along with your sprint, at the end of the sprint, along with the MVP, you can make sure that the technical debt is also paid off slowly. So that's one way to make sure that you're paying it off as much as possible. Also, you know that the product backlog is a single source of all requirements, right? It has to be truthful and transparent. So the technical debt also, you can make it part of the product backlog, and just like you prioritize your user stories, you can prioritize your technical debt, right? And you basically estimate your technical debt in such a way that you reflect how much cost what is the cost of paying off the technical debt, right? Like failure to do so will cost you XYZ amount of dollars, right? But if you pay off your technical debt, you get more profit, XYZ amount of additional profit. Put it in that kind of a language, try to estimate, try to put a cost component to your technical debt. That will give a more realistic picture of what your Scrum looks like, what your user story looks like, what happens when you pay off the technical debt. So, that's a very good estimate for the team. And also, as the team matures, one of the things about mature teams is they try to keep the technical debt to a minimum. And even, you cannot have zero technical debt, right? Every project, that's the beauty of software. You will have this debt. You cannot avoid it. But the idea is, how do you resolve it, right? How do you take care of it? How do you pay that off? That shows maturity. So the more mature your team is, the better they will be at tracking this debt, paying it off, right? So that is a very important part, keeping technical debt in mind. Some consequences of technical debt: if you don't pay it off, if you just don't consider it along with the product backlog, what happens is that eventually it's going to show up, right? It's going to increase your time to delivery, right? Your velocity is going to decrease. You're going to have significant number of defects. You will not be able to work on new features. It's like the iceberg in Titanic, right? So it'll just show like a small piece. You'll only see a small piece of the iceberg initially, but as you go closer, you'll see how massive it is, right? So that's the thing about the technical debt, that the more you postpone it, the bigger it keeps on getting. and it's only going to lead to rising development support cost. There's going to be decreased predictability. It's just that it's a bad structure. You'll have a bad product. You won't have a good quality product. Your team is going to underperform. There's going to be frustration. There's going to be decreased customer satisfaction. So try to make sure that your code is good. You have all the tests, and you pay off your technical debt. You service it. Don't keep it all to the end. And also you have to remember, right? There are some debt which don't really need to be repaid, right? Let's say a product is nearing the end of its life. It's a throwaway prototype, right? Or a product was deliberately built for a short life. If that product has a debt, you probably don't need to repay it, because in terms of cost, you probably are not going to pay too much on it, and you're not going to get too much out of it if you repay it. Take a strategic decision. If you're not gaining much out of paying the technical debt, don't pay it. Try to service the debt when you encounter it. That's the best. Keep the cycle short. You encounter the debt, you try to pay it off, right? Try to have a reasonable threshold. Work with the teams. Let them look at the technical debt. If they are responsible for it, let them pay it off. If any debt is not serviced, you should try to make it as visible and transparent as possible. Even if it's not serviced in a particular sprint, make sure it goes back to the product backlog and gets prioritized for a future sprint, right? So make it visible. Also, you can repay the debt incrementally along with the other user stories in your sprint, right? Instead of paying off big chunks at one time, which can be very problematic, have like a regular loan payment, right? You have a mortgage, you have a car payment. You don't try to pay off everything together, right? You pay it off in small installments over a period of 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. Same thing with technical debt. Don't try to pay off everything together. Have in every sprint, have a small portion paying off towards the debt, right? Then again, similar to a loan, try to attack the low-hanging fruits first. Anything that's a high-interest technical debt, try to pay that off first, right? That's gonna cost you less in the long run, right? Not all technical debt is of equal importance, right? Try to target and service the debt that is the most impactful, that has a very high interest. Specifically, any technical debt which is going to affect customer valuable work, right? Which will affect the product that you're selling to the customer, which will come into the limelight if not paid. That needs to be paid first, right?